Maverick News presents The Rick Walker Show. Defrag your mind.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Rick Walker. Welcome back to the Maverick News channel. Welcome, Maverick family. All kinds of stuff to share with you tonight. Lead story, though, Meta, Facebook versus Justin Trudeau and the federal Liberal government in Canada. Plus, Chinese police stations making headlines, not just in Canada, but also in the US. That story getting some international attention now. Finally, the mainstream media picking up on that in the wake of concerns about Chinese meddling in Canada's elections, with funds flowing to some politicians, apparently, allegedly. And we'll follow up on that story as well with one member of provincial parliament in Ontario resigning from his post in caucus with the provincial government of Ontario with Doug Ford, the premier there. So they've had a minor cabinet shuffle because that member of provincial parliament is accused of being part of a money redistribution network with funds coming from China. He says he didn't do anything wrong. He denies the allegations and says that the accusations are racially motivated. So we'll touch on that tonight as well. We'll look at earthquakes around the world as well, a volcano eruption, and we'll touch on that Wells Fargo bank run that has prompted the shutdown of that U.S. financial institution. That was what John was talking about in the call-in portion of our show last night, but we never actually got to talk much about that last evening. So we will touch on it tonight. So we have all that and more coming up right here on the Maverick News channel. Don't go away. More ahead right after this.
Maverick News. Fighting for freedom. Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, we are back. First up tonight, just going to talk about Meta. Meta is going to block access to news on Facebook and Instagram if Canada's Online News Act, taking form through Bill C-18, is adopted as is. So Facebook and Instagram, Meta, Mark Zuckerberg's company, they're saying that they would no longer post news content from mainstream media platforms on their social media platform if Bill C-18 is passed in its current form. So this is actually backfiring on the federal government and media companies. So Meta spokesperson Lisa LaVenture released this information today, saying that with the bill's current provisions, it would place Meta in an untenable position. She says, quote, a legislative framework that compels us to pay for links or content that we do not post and which are not the reason the vast majority of people use our platforms is neither sustainable nor workable. So social media companies like Google, Meta, they have been fighting against Bill C-18 because it would require them to negotiate deals that would then provide compensation to big media companies like CTV, Global, and others. So the big media companies in Canada and the federal liberal government have been supporting that bill, saying it would level the playing field for news outlets that compete with tech firms for advertising dollars. That is one of the things the big media companies have focused on since the birth of the internet, saying that is really why they are having trouble surviving. That is why the federal government has been pumping millions and millions and millions of dollars into those companies. Because all those ad dollars that used to go to television stations, radio stations, and to newspapers have been redirected largely to the social media companies. So Canada's Heritage Minister, Pablo Rodriguez, released a statement saying that once again, it's disappointing to see that Facebook has resorted to threats instead of working with the Canadian government in good faith. And I guess the tech or the tech companies like Google and Meta tried a similar approach in Australia, but it didn't quite work there. So Rodriguez, his remarks made reference to Facebook's move to block access to news in Australia. That was back in 2021. But then Meta backtracked after the Australian government made changes to an arbitration mechanism in their legislation. However, Meta has since threatened to block news access in other countries, such as the US, where Congress was considering similar legislation last year, known as the Journalism Competition and Preservation Act. Facebook has been floating the potential to block news access in Canada for many months. Bill C-18 is still making its way through Parliament. Mark Dinsdale, Meta Canada's head of media partnerships, raised the idea in October, where he argued that the proposed legislation presumes his company, quote, unfairly benefits from its relationship with publishers, when in fact, the reverse is true. He says that posts with links to news articles made up less than 3% of what people see in their Facebook feed, and said Canadians tell Meta what they want to see, and they're telling Meta that they want to see less news and political content on the Facebook and Instagram platforms. He goes on to say, we have repeatedly shared with the government that news content is not a draw for our users and is not a significant source of revenue for our company. There was a report back in 2018 from the Canadian Media Concentration Project, and that report revealed that Google had snagged half of Canada's internet advertising market share. That was in 2018. They have even more of that now. Facebook had in 2018 almost 28%. And then the remainder was divided up between Bell Media, Torstar, Twitter, and Post Media. Each of them had less than 2% each. I have to say, though, that I'm not really that worried about companies like Bell because they own half of the media assets in Canada, give or take. They have investments in cell phone infrastructure, cable, telephone, internet, and then straight up media companies like CTV, Globe and Mail. And then because they share technology and infrastructure with other companies like Rogers, Cogeco, other cable companies, and so on, they bounce off each other's cell towers and so forth. So pretty much if you pick up a newspaper, watch television, listen to the radio, surf the net, in one way or another, those big media companies are still profiting from you in some way. If you use any kind of mainstream media or any of the infrastructure that is in place in Canada to distribute content, that's the reality of it. And those big media companies get regulatory protection from the government, and they get grants and tax breaks as well, all designed to help them when they invest in new capital investments like more cell phone infrastructure or fiber optics. The government backs that up and gives them a handout every single time. If only they would give me a handout for the things that I do and give you a handout for the things that you do and you want to go into business. But they just are not as generous with small and medium-sized businesses. But if you're big, oh, they'll get behind you and they protect each other. It's a symbiotic, fascistic economic model, that is for sure. Public-private partnerships. So we'll see where all that goes. It is, in a way, very much related to Bill C-11, which is about Canadian content. And then Bill C-18 is about compensation from the media giants like Facebook, all the social media companies. They're trying to get them to give money back to the mainstream media companies. And that's what Trudeau wants, of course, and the NDP, I think, because those companies, those media outlets, those mainstream media outlets are very, very friendly to the sitting government of the day. Largely right now because they are bought and paid for with tax dollars, grants, bailout money, hundreds of millions of dollars being spent annually now. Whether you watch the CBC or not, your tax dollars are going there. And the same is true of every other mainstream media outlet, CTV, Global, and the list goes on. Even a lot of small and medium-sized newspapers. And certainly all of the large ones, including Toronto Star, Post Media, Globe and Mail, all of them. But the social media companies firing back. And, Pierre Poilievre kind of had it right the other day when he stood up in the House of Commons and really talked about the oligopoly of the media giants like Toronto Star, Toronto Sun, Globe and Mail, CTV, Global, when he said, that they really are getting a bailout because they've been unable to adapt. The technology has changed. It has made it possible for independent producers to go head to head with these big media companies because the cost of production has come down so much. It's very true. When I was working in mainstream media, when I first started, a video camera with the resolution of a VHS videotape was, this big. It weighed 40 pounds. And then there was a video recorder that weighed another 40 or 50 pounds. You had to carry both of those. And now, with a cell phone, you can take high definition, in some cases, even 4K video with something that just fits in your pocket. And we used to have big microwave and satellite trucks that you would use to go live from the scene. That was back in the 80s and 90s. And now you can go live from any place with a cell phone, a data feed, camera, and a little bit of initiative. And then the rest is all about the journalism. Identifying the story, reporting on it. And there are cameras everywhere. And people are worried about security cameras. There's a camera in everybody's pocket now, man. You're on camera all over the place, whether you realize it or not. People are live streaming all the time. Just saying. And that goes double for politicians. They're under constant surveillance as citizen journalists and just people in general whip out their phones and roll video live worldwide, including right here. I don't think that those media companies, well, how can I put it? I think that the media companies deserve to be paid for some of their content. I think everyone deserves to be paid for some of their content when they hit a certain threshold. When you're producing actual content that people really want on YouTube, they pay a little bit. And that, I think, is appropriate. You pay for the content on your platform when you are benefiting from it because you're selling ads around it. That's what Google and Facebook and Twitter, that's what they do. They sell ads. And when you're producing content, every time you post pictures, family photos, whatever it is, they're selling ads around that. They're selling you, and you're providing the content. And I'll tell you, it's actually a better deal than the deals quite often that you get from the broadcasting companies like CTV when you're an independent producer. Trust me. It's not that you don't really make money as an independent producer broadcasting on television these days. It's the way the system is set up. That's why I left Canada with my show and took it to the US. Anyway, just talking about that because it really does affect everything we do here. It affects what you get to see and hear. And I'm curious to know what your thoughts are as well on this issue of censorship and, more importantly, whether you even care if the news content from the mainstream media outlets is carried on Facebook and Instagram. So what we're going to do is we're going to shake it up and do things a little differently tonight. We're going to go to the phones early. We're going to go now. And you can talk about this issue, and then we'll come back and we'll dig into, we'll go to the phones for a little while, then we'll jump off, and we will look at some of the other news of the day later in the broadcast. Stay with me. I'm going to set those phones up, so get ready to dial.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching. We are Mavericks. We say no to the Trudeau and Biden New World Order. And to bugs. Because bugs are creepy and gross. And people should not eat bugs. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Hey, no! To bugs!
Okay, the phone lines are set up. Here's the number to call, and it'll be really nice to get some new callers tonight.
Join the conversation. Call 1-833-975-3733. That's 1-833-975-FREE. Speak up. Speak out. Make your voice heard. Maverick News. Fighting for freedom by defending your right to free speech. Be a Maverick. Join us.
Okay, there's the number to call, 1-833-975-3733. You can join the conversation right there. It's a free call. And here's our first caller of the night. Okay, you are on the air.
Hi, Rick. It's Dee from Vancouver calling.
Hi. How are you tonight?
Hi, I really love your show, Rick. It's the best show I ever seen in the whole wide world. This guy named the Mouth of the South keeps telling me to call in, but I'm just so nervous. I don't want to call in, but he made me call in tonight because he said he was going to donate $100 if I called.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Well, thank you for calling in.
I want to see if that Leo guy donates $100, Rick. That's why I'm calling in. But I really do love your show, and I don't know where I'm going with this, Rick. But thank you very much for having the show. Can you please move on to the next caller? Thank you.
Don't go away. Don't go away. Don't go away. Are you still there?
Okay, I'm still here, Rick.
All right. Just talk to me about one thing. Just pick a subject that you want to talk about. Anything you want.
Well, the Mouth of the South wants to talk about, you know what he wants to talk about. Sticking them cameras right in people's asses. You could use your video cameras as an advantage, folks. And you could turn the tables on the establishment if you do it right. And that's what scares them to the bone, Rick.
True.
Did you really think it was D? Did you really think it was D?
No, I saw the number.
I know she's chuckling right now. Oh, you saw the number, right? But no, you use it to your advantage. I was on my way for groceries today. A friend of mine took his house cameras last night, 5:30, somebody shot up the house next door to him. So he sent me the video. Okay. And I thought it was weird. And then we're driving down the road to grab groceries, me and the wife, and we seen a vehicle that was, they had the whole, maybe for a kilometer long, sectioned off. Okay.
Yeah.
And there was a white vehicle that was in the video that I'm thinking might have something to do with the shooting. So I pick out my phone and I start videotaping it. And this is what I think's going on. I was wrong, 100% wrong. It was somebody that got hit by that vehicle, a pedestrian, right? But they are looking for a white vehicle. But with camera footage, who am I, right? I got camera footage of the vehicle, the house getting shot up, okay, next door to my buddy, and him confronting the gunman, saying, "What the fuck's that? A gun?" And the guy says, "No." In the video, he goes, "No, it's a zip gun." He said, "I'm calling the fucking cops," and he called the police, right? And I got the video of the cops coming to the house and everything, right?
Oh.
But he didn't want me to share it with anybody for other reasons, right? You know, obviously you don't want any retaliation, but they did, you know, so just by having that video, my phone in my pocket, you could turn the tables on everything. There's a lot of shit going on in this city that people don't know about, Rick.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And I find out fucking light years before everybody else because of the power of the video and the camera, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's a powerful thing.
It is what it is. Well, you can hold governments accountable now because you know what? Look at, well, look at the where was it? Congress there. The when they stormed Congress, okay, in Washington, they got the cameras. Now we got NSA, we got the spy agencies out there. You could hear a pin drop in China if they wanted to tune into it. I want to know why there's no audio in that place. Are you joking me? We know there's audio to that video and what was being said. Right? Have you heard any audio on that?
No, I haven't. I haven't seen
right.
that.
And you know everywhere, especially Washington with the NSA, there's audio for that video. Now I want to hear what's being said. That's what's going to come out next. Okay, somebody has the audio for that because we, you know, with every video, unless you have it on silent mode, there's audio. Okay, and especially that place there.
Yeah.
You would think, right? But you can hold governments accountable because, you know, and they hate it. The conservative government, for example, okay, when Polyev came to town, I was filming it, right? And then afterwards, he was doing the meet and greet where people were lining up. I didn't get in that lineup. I don't have the time today for that shit, right? But people were getting in the lineup and getting a still picture with them on their phones. But they stated, "Oh, we don't want any live video." Right, so you couldn't take a live video of Pierre Polyev and say, "Hey, man, I'm with Pierre." Ask him a question, right? He didn't want it on his live. Now,
they're trying to control things,
right?
Yeah,
right. Where I'm wild, I'm live, and I'm free, my friend. And you know what? Like it, love it, or hate it, fuck you. It's the mouth of the South, and I'm going to report it the way that I see it, right? In the way that you're going to see it's live every time. You'll never seldom ever see me post a video that I filmed earlier in the day. I'm going live, and it's unscripted. And that's the key thing, right? There's no editing because you can't edit a lot of videos. You can re-edit any video.
Yeah.
Right. So when you go live, that holds people accountable, and that scares people to the core, my friend. Like I said, fuck, I don't need a 38 special or a 357 or the Glock 50 or any of that in my pocket. I got my cell phone.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, they say the pen is
fast.
mightier than the sword, but the video camera is even more powerful than that.
Right. So people need to start using it. I know there's a lot of shy people out there like, "D, you're shy. You got to call in." I was going to make $100 donation, but she don't want to call. Call my bluff. Take a bluff and D. Call. I'll give Rick $100. Right? There you go. With that, you know what, Rick? It's always exciting to be the first guy on your show. People are going to think that it's, I don't know, it's fixed. But we got to sit down and do a spoof of Don Cherry and Ron McLean. You know who's going to be Don Cherry in that one. You people out there, you know who I'm talking about.
Well,
and if Rick had babies with, who were you saying you're going to have babies with? John last night?
Yeah. I'm going to have babies with John.
You remember you said Yeah, you're gonna have babies with John. Well, I can guarantee you the baby's gonna come out with nice hair.
Well,
But we can't go there because the last time they did the experiment on what do we call it, anal fornified babies being made. We ended up that was in 1969. They tried it on a woman named Margaret Trudeau. Okay, and what did we get in the end? Justin, the first anal living baby. Okay. You know where I'm going with it.
I hear you.
That's what we have today. Thanks, Rick.
Thank you, Leo. Yeah, this is almost a family show, so we have to be careful.
It's a family show, so Dee, get your shit together. Call, make me pay. Show me the money, baby. I got it. Now, Rick, you want her to call too. Bye.
Of course. Okay, thank you, Leo. And yeah, you can join the conversation at 1-833-975-3733. That's 1-833-975-FREE. We'll take one or two more calls maybe, and then we'll move on to other news. It's a little unusual for us to go to the phone so early. We're just going to break it up a little bit tonight. But let me take a brief break while we get the next callers in the queue.
Join the conversation. Call 1-833-975-3733. That's 1-833-975-FREE. Speak up. Speak out. Make your voice heard. Maverick News. Fighting for freedom by defending your right to free speech. Via Maverick. Join us.
Okay, and we are ready to go to the phones now with John, who I'm going to have babies with. Hello.
Every time I call, someone calls me on a private number, and they don't talk. It's just, I don't know. Not just you, other people too. Where's the volume on this stupid thing?
I don't know.
Yeah, so I tell you, Rick, this whole world, everybody wants to know everybody's dirty laundry. And so it never fails. I'm on the phone, I get a call, private number or spam or whatever, but it's always something stupid. All the time. And then I delete the number and they call back. It's like they got that number there so they can track you. I'm being tracked, I'm pretty sure. Also,
yeah.
My provider, they want me off the system I'm on now, which is a secure system. It's not digital. And TV, phone, internet. And they want me to go to this digital system fantastic system for less money, for less money. Right now, they keep boosting my price up. Oh, man. Anyways, the fee's so high now that Monday, they're coming over to switch everything over and save myself about $80. Big deal. But the thing is, they're trying to sell me monitoring systems for your home. Like you can put a camera outside. I said, I don't need that. I already got one.
Yeah.
Trying to sell me cameras for inside. And you can see it on your cell phone. But you can go to work and someone calls. I don't need
Cameras
it.
are everywhere now.
Someone's always...
Yeah.
Huh?
Cameras are everywhere now.
They just want to track.
Yeah, and they want to sell you a security system for your home. So they can charge you more for your package.
But cheap.
Yeah.
$20.
Yeah.
But now, the new, like the remote for the TV, it's got a microphone on it. This girl I know, she just got her system redone,
Yeah.
and she has to talk into it for channels, channel 7, whatever. I ain't talking to nothing. Okay, so I have to disable all these, just like my cell phone that I bought. I had to upgrade, and it's got this Bixie shit, and it's a Snoops feature where they can hear everything you're saying anytime. So I blocked it, and now the converter, I'm gonna have to block it. Okay, there's 3 of them, three receivers, 3. I'm gonna block them all. I don't want them hearing anything. I've got another converter for another system, same thing. I blocked it. My iPad, everything's blocked. Bubblegum, tape, done. You know, bubblegum works the best, man. Put it over the speaker, piece of tape over it.
So
it blocks everything.
It blocks. You're blocking what? The microphones
and the cameras.
And the cameras.
Yeah. I don't need it.
Yeah.
I don't need it. My cell phone, that one, it's got Bixie. I can't block it. I can't take it out. I can't uninstall it.
So you're really worried.
So,
you're worried about them listening to you all the time and watching you.
Well, I'm not worried about it. I got nothing to hide. I'm just trying to find a way. Everything you buy today has got Snoop system. Your cars. That's why I bought an older car, because it doesn't have all the Snoop systems in it. Everything's.
What about your
everything
phone?
you do today?
What about your phone?
Well, my phone, I don't take it with me. Believe it or not, only when I go to a concert, take pictures, video. I don't take it with me, and if I do, I put it in the glove box. They still can track you. I turn the location off, but I don't think it's off. It might say off, but I don't think it's off. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know people who track their girlfriends on her cell phone. They know exactly where she goes. I go, man, are you jealous, man? What's the problem with you? You're stalking her. Does she know this? No. But, they go, she just got it at the store now. It's like Uber, Rick.
See, my wife wanted me to put a tracker thing on my phone. And that was okay for her to do it to me, but if I guarantee you, if I wanted to do it to her, that wouldn't fly.
So you can't track her. No.
I don't
dare do that. I'll be missing a pair if I did that. Not telling her.
No, I do not. Yeah. I do not track my wife. No. I
don't track nobody.
She always wants to know right where I am, though. And if she phones me and I don't pick up immediately, it's like, why aren't you picking up the phone? But when I call her,
I know a lot of people track their kids. Yeah. I don't even take my phone with me. They call me and she calls me and I go, I don't have my phone. It's at home. Can you hear it ringing?
Yeah.
I know a lot of people who track their kids on their phone. That's fine, tracking kids. But this one couple, they're divorced. They're going through a divorce. So now she tracked the kid to his girlfriend's house, and she knows exactly where she lives, where he is. You know.
See, you're just proving my point from the other night. Everyone's worried about smart cities, and I talked about these LED smart street lamps, and people are worried that those things are going to spy on you. And man, they don't need those things to spy on people. You already have your phones, everybody. Like
that's the best one. Yeah. That and your credit cards
That's right.
Your credit cards, they can track you everywhere you go. Everything you buy, all these points. Like some people, I don't bother with the points. Yeah. Like you go to Food Basic or whatever, no frills. You get bonus points on your food, and I don't bother with that shit. That's a tracking. And then next thing you know, your phone's full of
ads.
That's
right.
Yeah,
that's exactly right.
And
well, listen, we're going to move on.
Here it comes again. Look, another private call I got here. Look,
there you go. Well, you go get your private call. Maybe call back later in the show if we go back to the phones. And I got your mail, by the way. Thank you for that, John. I appreciate that.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Funny?
Yeah, it was funny. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, bye.
Right, see ya. All right, let's move on to Ashley from Alabama. Hello.
How you doing, Rick?
I'm okay. How are you?
Hi, man. I'm doing good, brother. Just want to call in and say, hey, how are you doing, man?
Excellent. Good to hear from you.
I hear you. Hey, I got a question for you. It's a dumb little question, but I just want to see what you think.
Sure.
Hey, what if Elon Musk makes a robot AI-2? I done heard this is what he's doing. He's going to make a robot to run for the president of America. What do you think about that?
I think that the robot would do a much better job than Mr. Biden would. Yeah, I think
Yes. It's supposed to be AI-2. It's got to be made in America to be America. You know what I mean?
Yes, sir.
You know, it can't be made in China.
That's right.
Yeah. I appreciate you agreeing with me with that, man, because I heard it on somewhere else on the web page that that's what they're doing. And I'm sitting here like, I told somebody else about it and they're sitting like, no, there ain't no way a robot will be a president. I don't know, man. Them things are a lot smarter than what we think they are.
That's right, especially when they get they're infused with artificial intelligence. So then that begs the question, are they alive? And if they're alive, then do they not deserve citizenship? And with that citizenship, do they not then get rights? And if they have rights, then they should be able to vote. And if they can vote, then they should be able to run for public office. And we could have an artificial intelligence robot as president of the United States. And we would be better off.
Yes, because they ain't going to lie. They ain't got no reason to lie. They ain't got feelings to lie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think I think he's doing it because it's got to be made in America to be America. You see where I'm going? You can't have something else made in China to be over here to try to run us because it'd be rigged, you know?
Yeah.
But he's building this one right here to run America because there's other countries saying they want other people to come America to run America that has balls. In other words, they want someone like Putin to come over here to run America, to make America right again. You know, because you can't have these politics out here trying to like, oh, we're going to do this law right here when they just signed another law where they can't get in trouble for signing the law, you know?
There's just one small detail that we're not discussing here. And that is that there is a lot of evidence to suggest that Mr. Biden might actually be an android.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to say. Because if you look at his neck, he's got an Adam's apple, but the Adam apple rolls. You know, there's a difference in the Adam apple and in the earplug. You know what I mean? The ear. Because they got a round ear and they got a pointy ear. Yeah. Well, Rick, man, I appreciate you breeding me, man. You know what I mean? I love Rick Swirl, man. You got some smart cats on your show, man.
Thank you for the call. It's been entertaining.
You got it, brother. I'll see you in a couple more days, man.
All right. You have a good one. See you. Bye for now.
All right, go.
Okay, that's enough calls for now. We will drop out of the phone call system and run a promo. And when we come back, we'll dig into some of the other stories of the day. So don't go away.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals. Defenders of individual rights and freedoms. Credible. Trusted. Grounded in reality. Maverick News. Defending free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
So as you know, we have been covering a lot of stories about the United Nations Declaration of Rights for Indigenous Peoples. We have been talking about what it all means for First Nations, and with everything that has gone on out west with that Winnipeg event and so on, we've been talking a lot about the Métis. Well, in Ontario, the province of Ontario in Canada, for our US viewers, a lot of people, it seems, want to become Métis. They're identifying as Métis, but the Métis Nation of Ontario has voted to oust over 5,000 citizens from its Métis citizenship roster due to incomplete applications for citizenship. So what is a Métis? If you're in the US or maybe you don't know, Métis is like a First Nations community, if you will. But it's comprised, if you're Métis, you're generally of mixed blood. You are half European, half Indigenous, but born here, I guess, or you could be adopted into a Métis family. It's a little bit complicated. According to the MNO president, Margaret Froh, some of the incomplete files that are being rejected from people who want to become or be recognized as Métis. These files could be incomplete because they maybe have not signed the oath of allegiance, or they haven't provided a long-form birth certificate linking them to Métis ancestry, a bunch of different reasons. It's also quite apparent that in various parts of Canada, a growing number of people who are probably not Métis are trying to be recognized as Métis because they want the same rights as people in the Métis communities. In other words, they want to become Indians for a variety of reasons, many of them related, I think, to UNDRIP, the United Nations Declaration of Rights for Indigenous Peoples, which in an accelerating fashion is beginning to reshape Canada, Canadian sovereignty, returning sovereignty of the land back to First Nations communities in many respects, and changing the nature of the relationship between the federal government and First Nations peoples. Well, we have this with Margaret Froh from the Métis community in Ontario, the Métis Nation of Ontario. She is the president of the organization, and this is her talking a little bit about this, I will call it a phenomenon of people trying to become Métis, and many of them, over 5,000 now, of those applications being rejected.
Ontario did on behalf, frankly, of all Métis, all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada before that had any meaning, before Section 35 had any meaning. And then, of course, over the course of the last 20 years, since that victory in Pali, we've continued to evolve. Our registries have continued to evolve. Part of the work that we did as Métis governments, all together under the umbrella of the Métis National Council, before we went to the Supreme Court in Pali, was come together to put forward a national definition of who are the Métis. We wanted to make it very clear to the Supreme Court, it is Indigenous peoples themselves that determine who they are and who belongs. And so we did that. We did that together. We advanced that case to the Supreme Court. We got the victory in Pali. We've been implementing that victory ever since. And one of the things that the court said in Pali, they spoke to the critical importance when you're proving Métis rights of objectively verifiable citizenship registries. And with the Pali decision, we finally started to see some investment from government into supporting our registries. So over the course of the Métis Nation of Ontario, by the way, is turning 30 this year. So it's a big year for us. Obviously, the communities we represent are much, much, much older than that. But over the course of the last 30 years, we've gone from having zero resources and an older, outdated definition to updating it to a national definition, working with other Métis governments, to finally having investments in our registry, to where we are today, having gone through this independent third-party, very transparent review of all of our citizenship files. We have a state-of-the-art citizenship registry that is comparable, I would say, to it is, bar none, I would say, one of the leading Indigenous registries in this country.
So turning to another topic, the MNO recently signed a self-government implementation agreement with the federal
This is from the
government.
Aboriginal People's
What exactly
Television
does this
Network,
mean
by the
for
way,
Métis
to
citizens?
give them credit.
It's a further advancement in that recognition of those inherent Métis rights of self-determination and self-government. We had signed.
Oops, something happened there. We lost our feed. Hang on. Come on. Do we have an internet problem? Just give me a moment. See if we can fix this. We'll try and reestablish the connection. Seem to have an internet problem here, folks.
Services. And the third thing that it does, key thing that it does, it's a further advancement in that recognition of those inherent Métis rights of self-determination and self-government. We had signed the first Métis self-government agreement in June of 2019 alongside our sister Métis governments from the Métis Nation of Alberta and the Métis Nation of Saskatchewan. And it immediately recognized we represent rights-bearing Métis communities that have inherent rights. It recognized our mandate to implement those inherent rights, and it put us on a very clear step-by-step process to transition to a fully recognized Indigenous government in Canadian law. What the new agreement that we just signed, it confirms what was in the original agreement, including that the MNO is a recognized Métis government for the communities that we represent in Ontario, and that we're mandated to represent them in terms of implementing those inherent rights. But it also immediately recognizes the MNO's lawmaking powers in those three core governance areas. So citizenship, leadership selection, and our internal operations, or our governance, as well as in the area of Métis child and family services. And the third thing that it does, key thing that it does, is confirm that Canada is committed to reaching a self-government treaty with the Métis Nation of Ontario that's going to ensure that our self-governing rights are constitutionally protected under Section 35 of the Constitution Act. And so this is, as we've been saying, especially as we're engaging with Canada around things like the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act and that action plan that Canada is developing, recognizing and supporting Métis self-government is reconciliation in action. It's consistent with UNDRIP. And it's, as well as moving forward with establishing a clear process to support the resolution of historic grievances or claims from Métis communities. But again, Métis self-government and supporting that is in fact reconciliation in action. And so this new agreement really allows us to ensure that the new rights recognition language and techniques that weren't available to us in 2019 when we signed that first agreement, that we have those in place, immediately recognizing Indigenous self-government and Métis rights. But also the fact that Canada has changed its position on a number of issues, including this concept of constitutional protection for Indigenous self-government agreements, which is that, frankly, that's very good news for all Indigenous governments. And I guess the last thing that I will say about this new agreement is that it is very clear it is a legally binding agreement as well.
Okay, President Fro, we're going to leave it there.
So hang on just a moment here. We're going to take another break. Well, actually, you know what I do? This is related to that. And this is a UN expert on Indigenous rights. And this is Jose Francisco Calitze of the United Nations Special. He's a UN Special Rapporteur on the rights of Indigenous peoples. And he is on a 10-day visit to Canada examining the issues surrounding First Nations, Inuit, and Métis as they relate to the implementation of UNDRIP, or the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And this is a news conference where he explains a little bit about what he's doing. And his visit here will accelerate, I think, the implementation of UNDRIP in Canada. It's transforming the country, folks. It truly is. Hang on just a moment.
Territory of Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation. In my capacity as the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, I am pleased to share my preliminary observation and recommendation at the end of my official visit to Canada that took place from the 1st to the 10th of March 2023. The purpose of my visit was to understand, in the spirit of mutual cooperation and constructive dialogue, how Canada implements the rights of Indigenous peoples in order to identify good practices and possible obstacles, and to present concrete recommendations for overcoming the challenges I observe. My final assessment and recommendation to Canada will be presented in a written report to the Human Rights Council at its 54th session later this year. Unfortunately, due to the limited time we have, my preliminary observation will not reflect the full range of issues brought to my attention, nor all the initiative of federal and provincial government related to rights of Indigenous peoples. Let me start by thanking the Government of Canada for its cooperation with my mandate, by inviting me to visit, for the welcome extended by its representatives, and for its openness and cooperation before and during the visit. I also offer my deep gratitude to Indigenous peoples who welcomed me to their territories, especially those who traveled to share their stories and concerns with me. I am inspired by their strength and determination to continue defending their rights and seeking justice. I would also like to thank the government of Quebec, Manitoba, and British Columbia for the cooperation extended to my mandate. I regret that the government of Alberta declined my invitation to meet, especially considering the concerning situation of Indigenous people in the province. I acknowledge the progress made by Canada towards the promotion and protection of the rights of Indigenous peoples since the visit of my predecessor in 2003 and 2013, and the many efforts by Canada to implement the recommendations. During my visit, I was informed of both good practices and possible obstacles to the promotion and protection of the rights of Indigenous peoples. I commend the Canadian government on a number of positive measures, including the passage of Bill C-15, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, and similar law enacted by provinces of British Columbia. I encourage all provinces and territories to make similar commitments and urge all levels of government to implement this law in accordance with international human rights standards. I will be closely monitoring the process to finalize and adopt the National Action Plan for implementation of Bill C-15 in consultation with Indigenous people, and I am interested to see how Canada will harmonize the Indian Act with the rights set out in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. Since the visit of my predecessor in 2013, the Government of Canada and its province have taken significant steps to engage meaningful negotiation to transfer governance responsibility to First Nations, Inuit and Métis authorities, and related to criminal justice, child welfare, health, and other services. I just wanted to clarify also, because I am not very clear on the division of Canada, that I always forgot to mention their territories. So it's territories and provinces. I congratulate the Government of Canada for signing self-government agreement with three Métis nations, the establishment of 50 self-government negotiation tables across the country is another important step toward reconciliation and overcoming the negative legacy of colonialism. For this reason, I encourage Canada to provide adequate funding for strengthening this process and promoting a nation-to-nation relationship. I further commend Canada for advancing representation of Indigenous peoples in political and public life at the highest level by appointing Indigenous women to the office of Governor General and to the Supreme Court of Canada. I welcome the final report 2015 of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, TRC, and its 94th calls to action, and the final report 2019 of the National Inquiry of Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls, MIYWG, that include 231 calls for justice. And in 2021, the government of Canada passed a legislation to mark September 30th as the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, to observe the ongoing impact of residential schools. I encourage all provinces and territories to make the same acknowledgement. Despite the positive measures taken by Canada, Indigenous peoples continue to face serious obstacles to achieving full enjoyment of their individual and collective rights. The current human rights situation of Indigenous people in Canada cannot be fully understood without considering the legacy of residential schools and intergenerational trauma they created. Over 150,000 First Nations, Métis, and Inuit children were separated from their families and forced to attend the government-funded school between 1870s and 1997. In every place I visit, I hear about how Indian residential school, more appropriately termed institutions, fracture familial and community ties. For over 100 years, successive generations of children, many from the same communities and families, were sent to this institution and never returned in numbers that may never be fully known. This experience was largely hidden from Canada's history until 2021 discovery of 215 unmarked graves at the Kamloops Residential School captured the world attention. Investigations into unmarked graves and effort to collect archival information have revealed numerous accounts of Indigenous children who entered residential school, hospital, and mental facilities and went missing, often with no information provided to their families. Children were subject to physical and sexual abuses, and many survivors now live with post-traumatic stress, substance abuse, depression, and other mental health issues. Access to information is critical for these families looking for closure and healing. The Catholic Church, healthcare facilities, and any other institution holding records are encouraged to disclose this documentation. I encourage Canada and the provinces to make it easier for survivors and families of missing children to access information by taking the legislative and other measures. During my visit, I observed the legacy of colonialism and the history of abuse and discrimination have left survivors and their families with a deep mistrust of Canadian institutions. First Nations, Métis, and Indian people want to lead the reparation of the remains of their missing children in culturally relevant way with adequate financial support from Canada to cover the cost of forensic investigation, exhumation, and or commemoration, healing, and wellness. Numerous concerns were presented about the 2023 technical arrangement with the International Commission on Missing Persons that Canada reportedly concluded without consulting Indigenous peoples. I fully support Indigenous people call for a survivor-centered, Indigenous-led investigation to mitigate against further harm in accordance with the TRC Call to Action 76. Existing investigation process of burial sites must respect Indigenous people law and protocols relating to grieving, death, and burial practices. There is a significant need to fund culturally relevant Indigenous health and well-being support to address trauma and to remove obstacles to accessing burial sites, particularly when they are located in private lands. I welcome the federal government creation of the National Advisory Committee on Residential Schools, Missing Children and Unmarked Burials, and the appointed of an independent special interlocutor for missing children and unmarked graves and burial sites. The federal government has also provided dedicated funding for indigenous people to undertake research to identify missing children and unmarked burials. However, concerns were expressed by indigenous representatives that the nature of funding agreement does not allow sufficient time to conduct investigations. It's limited to communities whose land encompass residential schools and does not permit funds to be used for legal assistance, exhumation, and DNA matching. I received disturbing reports about the rise of denialism in relation to discovery of unmarked graves and call on Canada to counter misinformation about residential school with education and awareness raising. Educating the public about the history of residential school requires the preservation of a large body of evidence documenting grave and systematic violation of Indigenous children's human rights who were forced to attend Canadian residential schools. The Supreme Court of Canada ordered to destroy testimonies and other records in 2027 frustrates education effort and many obstruct future attempts to collect evidence of physical, sexual, and emotional abuse and other criminal wrongdoing, including potential information about the location of unmarked burial sites. I call upon the government of Canada to urgently act to preserve this documentation in cooperation with Indigenous peoples. Canada has taken important steps toward recognition and redress of the abuses and trauma caused by residential schools and day schools. The House of Commons unanimously recognized the residential school system as genocide on October 27, 2022, building on the 2015 finding of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. The government of Canada has also settled and is continuing to resolve a number of class action claims of survival and their families. However, full resolution of residential school claim is necessary to achieve true reconciliation, including for Catholic church-run institutions and residential schools established by provinces. I call upon the government to favorably settle the claim of Métis survivors and their families. I also learned that some survivors who suffered severe trauma were not emotionally prepared to present claims by the government's deadline, but may wish to do so in the future. In accordance with the general principle of international law, that statute of limitation should not apply to grave crimes like the ones committed in residential schools. I call upon the government of Canada to reopen the claims process for those excluded from initial settlement. Canada has embarked on an important journey towards reconciliation that must dismantle the foundation of a structural racial discrimination against Indigenous peoples. The TRC calls for action have shown the way forward and should be fully implemented. As I hear during my visit, Indigenous people want the government of Canada to respect their rights on an equal footing, including but not limited to their right to self-determination, land territories, and resources, as well as the right to free, prior, and informed consent. The child welfare system is continuing the removal of Indigenous children from their families and communities and reproducing the negative impact of residential schools. Despite comprising 7.7% of the Canadian population, over 53% children in care are indigenous, up to 90% in some provinces. The majority of Indigenous children removed are placed with non-Indigenous families, which often result in children losing their language, culture, identity, and family ties. Often the decision to place Indigenous children in foster care is due to lack of adequate housing on reserve and sometimes occurs without consulting Indigenous peoples. I recall that the General Comment 11 of the Convention on the Right of the Child required that best interests of the indigenous children be interpreted by taking into account cultural consideration and in consultation with indigenous peoples. For this reason, I welcome Canada's passage of Bill C-92, which acknowledged the right of indigenous peoples' self-government over child welfare service. However, it is discouraging to hear that some provinces have challenged this law in the courts. Entering the child welfare system increases the risk of incarceration and of becoming murdered or missing. Indigenous youth make up 8% of the population in Canada, are incarcerated at a rate of around 50%. Canada must adopt holistic reform in consultation with indigenous people to address the root cause of these problems, including racial discrimination, poverty, inadequate housing, and the lack of culturally appropriated interpretation of the best interest of the indigenous child. Intergenerational trauma caused by a residential school and structural racial discrimination have also led to present-day crisis concerning missing and murdered indigenous women and girls. During my visit, I was alarmed by reports and testimonies about missing and murdered indigenous women and girls. I welcome Canada's positive response to recommendations of my predecessor and the TRC call to Action 41 to hold a national inquiry. In 2019, the national inquiry was concluded and a final report was delivered that includes 231 calls for justice directed at governments, institutions, social services providers, industries, and all Canadians. In spite of the report of the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, 1996, TRC calls to action, 2015, the missing and murdered indigenous women and girls call for justice, 2019, the number of missing and murdered indigenous women.
Okay, so we're going to pull out of this. We've been on this now for what, about 15 minutes or so. We can't devote too much more time to this particular subject tonight, but this gives you perspective, and it's important to get this perspective because this guy represents the United Nations. And he's here overseeing the implementation of the United Nations Declaration of Rights for Indigenous Peoples, UNDRIP, which is transformational for Canada. Various views on it. We heard from the president of the Métis Organization of Ontario, and we know other people view it differently and much less favorably. So it's controversial. We've shown you videos with Ellis Ross from British Columbia, a member of the provincial legislature out there, who says UNDRIP is dangerous. And you know what my views are. I mean, I prefer made in Canada solutions for Canadian issues and challenges. I would prefer that the United Nations not get involved in our national affairs. Nevertheless, right now, we have to deal with this. The federal government has not only adopted UNDRIP, they've passed additional legislation giving it real teeth, because that legislation is written in such a way that it means UNDRIP supersedes the Constitution. So this is very significant. As I say, it's transformational, changing the relationship between the federal government and First Nations peoples. And it's coming from way on high. International. Globalist, if you will. That's your globalist standing right there at the podium. Listen carefully. Change is upon us. We need to make the best of it, make the most of it. Figure it out, understand it, educate yourself. I'll be right back.
Maverick News. Fighting for freedom.
Okay, still a lot of earthquake activity, volcano activity around the world. As I indicated the other night, the one night we had over 500 earthquakes worldwide. On average, normally you have about 55. In Indonesia, the Merapi volcano has erupted, blanketing a nearby village in ash. And in fact, at least 8 different communities around that volcano have been affected by the volcanic ash. Let's just get some footage up here for you so you have a point of reference on this. Hang on just a moment. We're almost there. Here we go. So that's what it looks like. Erupted around noon Saturday, today. Look at that. That's in Indonesia. So you have those clouds of hot ash spewing a mixture of rock, lava, and gas. And the effluent from that volcano traveled up to 7 kilometers down its slopes. That column of hot smoke clouds rose 100 meters into the air. That according to the National Disaster Management Agency in Indonesia. Fortunately, believe it or not, no reports of casualties so far. But all that black soot blocked out the sun, and the villages around that volcano have been covered in ash and soot. The air is thick with the effluent from that volcano. Look at that. Roads covered in ash. So that volcano is one of Indonesia's most active volcanoes. Its last major eruption was in 2010. And when that happened, it killed over 300 people and forced the evacuation of over 280,000 residents. And today's eruption was the most powerful eruption since 1930, when about 1,300 people were killed. An eruption back in 94 killed 60 people. And as I say, there's a lot of earthquake activity around the globe still tonight. Much more than normal. Why, it's not clear, but it's certainly concerning. Mother Nature, Mother Earth, if you will, is a little bit angry. Now, you can equate this to a variety of things if you want to. Some people would probably try to suggest this is the result of climate change, but I would argue this has probably nothing to do with climate change because it's coming from inside the earth. The same thing with the earthquakes. That's my personal opinion. And you know, people worry about cars when a volcano erupts and you get all of that effluent, all those gases coming out of the volcano. When Mother Earth has a great big burp like that, all kinds of toxic stuff is thrown into the atmosphere. Toxic gases of all kinds. Just because it comes from the center of the earth doesn't mean it's clean or healthy. That is not healthy. That's not good for you. And people are worried, of course, all the time about various chemicals and exhaust and this and that. But even Mother Earth, Mother Nature, is capable of throwing toxins at us. It's just the way the world is. And in fact, some of these things are, well, destructive at first, like say a forest fire or even a volcano erupting. Some of these, they're just natural occurrences. And Mother Nature has a way of healing itself and rejuvenating. That's the way the world works. And all that ash and soot, it's actually needed. You need some of that carbon in the atmosphere because that's what allows water particles to form and create clouds, and then you get rain. It's all part of the process. We're living in a giant terrarium. And the balance of nature just has a way of finding that right balance. As much as we like to think we're in control of everything, nobody here gets out alive, folks. The cycle of life continues. But the immediate concern is the safety of the people there. And as I say, fortunately, no indications of any casualties, at least not yet. Now, what about those earthquakes? Well, let's take a look at what's going on. And this will give you some indication. Again, look at this. We've got a lot of earthquake activity around the globe. Some of these are significant earthquakes. Look at the size, 5.3, 5.0, 4.9, 5.1. Those are strong. Look at them all. That's today. And we know that we had a lot of activity around Turkey. And all these things seem to be concentrated in certain areas. A lot of things affect earthquakes. I think the gravitational pull of the moon, maybe even the sun, shifting plates within the earth. A lot of activity right there. But as you can see here in Canada, nothing. Nothing. Not around where we live. You get up here in the far north, up into the Arctic, and you start looking around up there, and Alaska area, you've got some activity up there. And look at that concentration of activity right there, all the way down. Not as much as there was a few days ago, but still more than normal. Just thought I'd share that with you guys. It's, I think, just something to take note of. And some of those quakes in the last few days have been extremely destructive and deadly. Just worth noting. Just worth noting. Okay, going to take a break. I'll be right back. Don't go away.
Fighting the Great Reset. By leading the Great Resistance. Maverick News. The antivirus programs for your mind.
Okay, so Wells Fargo, that was the bank that John was referring to yesterday that is running some big problems. And let me just check something here. So just bring you up to date on it because we really didn't get to talk about it much yesterday. Here's a short report. Bring this up for you. Here we go.
If you're a customer with Wells Fargo, you may have had a little scare as you logged into your online account today. You logged on and saw you were missing a whole bunch of money. Well, according to downdetector.com, still almost 100 issues reported about 30 minutes ago. And this morning, the bank said in a statement that some customers' direct deposits transactions weren't showing up. Wells Fargo initially said there was a technical issue to blame for the wrong bank balances. And we spoke with a financial advisor to get advice on what you can do to protect yourself.
If possible, to have some sort of overdraft protection on your accounts, so something like this does happen again while the process is being worked on, that you're not overdrawn. That's a little bit difficult for some people, probably many people right now.
Yeah, really big headache there. USA Today is reporting that Wells Fargo reps say the problem will be shored up by Saturday and they'll refund fees incurred by this problem.
So that was a day ago. And hang on here just a second. So I know that Wells Fargo's customers did report missed paychecks due to a glitch. But it's not clear what is causing the direct deposit issue. The bank is in trouble. A Wells Fargo spokesperson has told Forbes that the bank is aware that some customers' direct deposit transactions are not showing up on their accounts, but did not provide a timetable for fixing the issue. The glitch comes at a tumultuous time for banks in the U.S., capped by the federal government taking control of Silicon Valley Bank on Friday morning, marking the largest American bank failure since the 2008 financial crisis. SVB's stock plunged more than 60% on Thursday after it reported reduced customer deposits, which put a strain on other banks, Wells Fargo, despite no obvious solvency issues at financial giants like Wells Fargo. The benchmark KBW Bank Index declined more than 8% at times Thursday, its largest fall since June of 2020. So I really have not been up to speed on this story. John mentioned it. Some people have sent me some links here. I'm just trying to share this with you tonight to, again, just address it because it was mentioned, but not really properly addressed last evening. So for our U.S. viewers, if you are interested in this, you might want to check online for more details. I'm not going to get too deep into this because it's not a story that I've been actively following. Wells Fargo, it says here in this Forbes article that I've found, has been plagued with a series of legal troubles over the past several years, including a fake account scandal where employees created millions of checking and savings accounts for real customers without their consent to meet quota goals set by top executives. The company agreed to pay a $3 billion fine for the fake accounts in 2020, and former CEO John Stumpf was banned from ever working in the banking industry again. And SVB was shut down by a California regulator after their stocks crashed amid turmoil. So, problems on the banking front, on the U.S. side. The banking industry is somewhat different in the U.S. than it is in Canada. The market is different. The U.S. is much bigger than Canada. The Canadian banks are regulated in different ways. We don't have as many banks in Canada either. And SVB being mentioned here and the way that it has affected Wells Fargo. And I know that there was something of a run on Wells Fargo accounts. There was sort of a run on the bank yesterday, but SVB has been shut down by the California regulator because the stocks crashed. So Silicon Valley Bank Financial has been closed down amid the ailing firm's attempts to seek a buyer and raise capital, intensifying turmoil that prompted concerns of possible government intervention and staggering losses at other banks and among cryptocurrencies. So SVB was closed Friday morning, yesterday, after reports that the bank's parent company hired advisors to explore a possible sale. The agency said insured depositors will have full access to their insured deposits no later than this coming Monday. Shares of SVB Financial were halted Friday morning after they fell more than 64%, after already plunging by 60% Thursday, following an announcement the lender had lost $1.8 billion after selling securities worth $21 billion. The S&P Select Banks Index at one point fell more than 3% Friday and 14% over the last 5 days, including declines with the Dow Jones Industrial Average 0.2%, the Standard & Poor 500 0.7%, and the NASDAQ at 0.9%. After four of the largest U.S. banks lost $52 billion in market value Thursday. Though they paired losses, other banks, including Goldman Sachs, 2.5%, and Bank of America at 0.6%, also posted declines Friday, though JP Morgan is up 1.7%. Issues with SVB Financial, in addition to the liquidation of the crypto banking giant Silvergate Capital, have caused Bitcoin and other prices to drop 11% and 10% over the past 5 days. So volatility, turmoil, even in the cryptocurrency market because of SVB and the problems there. So hold on to your wallets, folks. It's turned into a bit of a ride. Okay, another break, and then I'm not sure where we're going when we come back, but I will return right after this.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals. Defenders of individual rights and freedoms. Credible. Trusted. Grounded in reality. Maverick News. Maverick News. Defending free speech. Free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching. Maverick News. Fighting for freedom.
Okay, so we're going to go back to the phones now. It is 7:36 p.m. on this 11th day of March 2023.
Join the conversation. Call 1-833-975-3733. That's 1-833-975. Free. Speak up. Speak out. Make your voice heard. Maverick News. Fighting for freedom by defending your right to free speech. Be a Maverick. Join us.
Okay, the phone lines are open, and this is the number to call, 1-833-975-3733. And here's our first caller of this session. Hello, how are you tonight? You tell me, sir, what would you like to talk about this evening? Okay, you go right ahead. Oh, hang on a second. You know what? We got to start over. Your call was not up on the screen, so people could not hear you. They could only hear me. So let's start again. Please introduce yourself. The floor is yours, sir. You want to talk about the earthquakes?
Good evening, Rick. So I see you've been kind of chit-chatting there a bit on the oh, and just don't forget to remind me, because I got something I'd like to maybe put out there on this Wells Fargo thing.
Okay, sure.
This earthquake, volcano, it's a real I can lay it down to you probably in about 2 minutes. One is the sun does affect planet Earth in earthquakes.
Mm-hmm.
It has a direct effect on that. One is, do you know anything about the expansions of metal, Rick? You know what happens when you get a piece of metal hotter?
Yeah. It expands and it contracts. Yep. When it gets cold, it contracts. Yep.
Okay, so we have a north and a south pole in a magnetic field. So you know what happens when you hook a battery up to an electric motor on a car? To cause it to spin, it requires a negative and a positive. So we have a negative and a positive on our pole. And every once in a while, the sun's going to spit off a little bit extra. And it could cause that just to get a little hotter and expand.
Mm-hmm.
And inside those plates that we're all riding along on, you're up on the northeast corridor of a rock shelf. Some of the oldest exposed rock on the planet is located up there off the east coast of Canada and Ireland.
Yep.
Rock that's been exposed the longest in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of thickness in that. So it has a tendency to kind of, you're in a boat, Rick. How you like that? You're in a big rock boat.
It's true.
And we're floating. We're just floating around on top of this big liquid mass with an iron core.
Yep.
Whenever iron comes in contact with a negative and a positive polarity in a magnetic field, it causes power to that core, which it makes the core spin. It's super hot. Every once in a while, it may spin just a little bit more, or it may spin a little slower. But the temperature variations in the mantle and the core and all have a plus or minus in there. Whenever it gets a little bit too much magnetic field in it, it expands, which causes a lot of earthquakes. And it causes either just as it's called a contraction. Whenever it contracts, you get a little more activity out of the volcano because that liquid has to have somewhere to go. And if people think they're nervous about all these earthquakes and volcanoes everywhere, I mean, show me a country that don't have major volcanoes on it, that are dormant. These that are going off, those are little babies. Those are babies. You know, so you can get led into thinking the world's coming to an end, but like you said, we live in an aquarium, and it's been going on. It's actually going on less now on the earthquakes and volcanoes than it was perhaps a million years ago, because it was pretty smoking back then. But not to change the subject on you, but there's not really nothing to worry about there. You know, there's nothing at all to worry about. I'm glad we have volcanoes. It helps our atmosphere. You know, it just does. And if anybody didn't know what a hurricane killer is, that's a dust plume. You know, it'll cause adverse weather to not exist. But anyways, I wanted to let you know something about this Wells Fargo thing. Whenever, let's go back to 2008. Let's say we had a market crash. And what had happened was there was federal legislative laws put in place at that point whenever the federal institution of government felt it necessary to loan funds to corporations to keep them from having to file a bankruptcy in a certain way. They borrowed that money from essentially us, the people. They borrowed it from the people. We loaned it to them. Well, inside that, they wrote adjustments inside of all that, and it's known now as a bail-in, which it authorizes big bank chains and institutions to be able to borrow from their shareholders or their deposits. It's essentially, it leads up to the banking industry borrowing money from the deposits, which it's a well-known fact. There was just something that went on over in Europe not so long ago about the same incident. So whenever an institution feels as though it's really in a pinch for some cash flow, there's a lot of credit out, you know, and it's like they have 265 million plus credit card holders alone inside the country of America. You know, you can only imagine. So whenever the bank has no money coming in, it has no revenues coming in, only because people are just interested, gross. There's nothing's really going on. They're not making any money. They're losing money. So whenever they get in a pinch, they're authorized now to be able to borrow from the depositor. And it's perfectly legal. But then it can cause what they call a cash drought, which means it can be a cash drought. It means that if you run a business to where you have to maintain your business, it's like a check cashing business, for instance. If I needed $30,000 in cash from a bank, it may make things difficult for that situation. You know, so it's either the bank's in serious trouble and it had to borrow the money from somewhere, or somebody made a computing error. But I did probably more than likely, it was probably a bail-in, what's known as a bail-in, that authorizes the company to borrow from the deposits. But moving on, I didn't mean to twist your ear up too much,
It's okay.
but back on this earthquake thing, planet Earth lives in a place called E0. It's sort of a mathematical equation. It's a sweet spot. Whenever it moves out of that sweet spot in a magnetic field, then it kind of makes things kind of rock around a little bit down there inside the planet. So, I mean, it's been doing it for, I don't know, how old's the Earth, Rick?
Oh, I think people guess, but
Mhm.
who the heck knows? I mean, it's
Yeah. So I'm just, I'm out there. I don't mean to blab and blab and blab, but it just kind of, it was, and here's another thing that I've been keeping up with you is this thing about the train wreck thing. The chemicals get spilled and all that.
yeah.
The fact of the matter is BASF or whoever it is who owns those chemicals in those cars, whoever owns the chemical is not the one that's supposed to be responsible for it. It's the person who owns the train. The fact of the matter is, Rick, is if I went up there and said, hey, I want to buy a house here. And then somebody says, no, you don't want to buy a house there. You see, it doesn't really matter if you feel as though your home is your castle. That's your major investment. If you owned a $300,000-$400,000 house inside that city, and you said, "Hey, I want to sell this house," you can't sell it because nobody's buying. If you know what I mean, Rick.
Yeah.
And it's the same. It's the same as if somebody runs into me and it's their fault. I expect for those people to have insurance to pay for my vehicle. The fact of the matter is I think that it would be fair that anybody inside that city who feels as though they want to move, they don't want to be nowhere near that anymore. And I think that the company that owns that railroad track with those train cars on there should have to insure that. In all fair, because even if you had to sell your house and move to another city, good Lord, good Lord. You're going to try to sell a house to somebody that's not going to buy it. You're going to try to maintain your payments, your insurance, your mortgage, your car payments, your kids' school, and everything else. You got to go through that. And go and find another house and be able to afford another house to move into, and hopefully something's going to be done about the house that you were living in. So I think that they should draw a circle around that town out about 20 miles, and I think that the railroad company should own it, point blank. And as far as what went up into the air and what got spilled into the ground, there's probably an average of that all the way across the United States every day that gets spilled at gas pumps, at gas stations, all these spots at the pumps and everything else. People don't really think about it, but it happens. We got 400 million people between Canada and America, so it happens. So that pretty much gets spilled every single day inside these two countries. It's just, in that instance, I think everything within 20 miles, the railroad company should have to own that,
Yeah.
Because down here in the Gulf, when they spilled the oil, the BP incident, they used a chemical that causes the oil slick to solidify and sink to the bottom of the ocean. Turns it essentially into a black rock sitting on the bottom of the ocean. Well, in those reservoirs near and around where that incident was at, I would say that that's more than likely how it was treated. It was treated with a solidifying agent. It's laying on the bottom of the streams, and anytime anybody walks in it, it's never going to go away. It's never going to go away.
Mm-hmm. Well, listen,
So they're
sir, I
stuck with it.
appreciate the call. I think what we're going to do is.
Was that first?
I'm sorry, what's that?
Was that first? Was that first?
You
I
were.
beat Mouth.
I don't know if you were
I
first
beat
or
Mouth of the
second.
South.
For this session, I think you're
anyhow,
first, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyhow, man, if the women don't find you handsome, they'll at least find you handy. You know who says that, hey?
Yeah, well, I'm working on both, so it's always a challenge.
Oh, yeah, just close your eyes. It's worse when you get older.
That's for sure. Thank you very much for
All
calling
right,
in.
yeah, good evening, man.
Okay,
All
sir.
right,
Have a great night. All right. Let's pull out of this, and we're going to deal with a couple of other stories when we come back right after this break. Don't go away.
Maverick News. The world is watching.
So, Harry and Meghan, apparently, they're caught up in this whole SVB banking thing. SVB being the bank that caused all the turmoil for Wells Fargo and the other banks as well. And even the price of cryptocurrencies, kind of throwing the banking system into a little bit of a tizzy. Well, Harry and Meghan apparently had invested or had all their money wrapped up in Silicon Valley Bank, and they stand to lose millions, according to reports tonight. So that's another aspect of this story that we're going to have to keep an eye on. Somehow I think that even though they had a lot of money in SVB, I think they're still going to be okay. Just something about it. Just something tells me they're going to be okay. I don't think we should worry too much. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's going to be okay. Harry and Meghan, yeah, I think they'll be all right. Global news in Canada has been on the cutting edge of this story that we mentioned at the top of tonight's broadcast. Vincent Ke, and I was pronouncing his name incorrectly last night. I apologize for that. He is not a politician that has really been sort of on my radar. He just hasn't been, super high profile, but he is now. He has resigned from the Ontario Progressive Conservative Caucus because of allegations of involvement in 2019 election interference. Specifically, this relates to alleged Chinese money flowing into the hands of some politicians in Canada, and that money potentially influencing election outcomes in some ridings, but not apparently the overall outcome of the federal election. I don't know. But he has resigned from the Conservative Party. And this follows a report from Global News of allegations by intelligence sources that Ke was involved in an election interference network directed by China's consulate in Toronto. And, I've had some people say, oh, come on, China isn't really involved in influencing elections in Canada. This is just Chinophobia. No, I think there's genuine evidence pointing to Chinese involvement. and attempts to influence the elections here in Canada. Absolute evidence. It's an issue. And we've seen that information leaked from the Canadian Security Intelligence Service in Canada to the media, and Global has to get the credit for these stories because they have been breaking them. Now, in this case, they have new allegations against this politician. He denies those allegations and has said that he's being targeted because of racism. Ka represents the Toronto area riding of Don Valley North. And he says in this quote, "While the Global News allegations about me are false and defamatory, I do not want to be a distraction to the government and take away from the good work Premier Ford is doing for the province of Ontario." That was in a statement that he posted on Twitter. He will now sit in the provincial legislature as an independent. He offered to step away from the Ontario PC caucus, according to Caitlin Clark, a spokesperson for Doug Ford, Ontario's premier. Premier agreed and has accepted his resignation effective immediately. And this statement from the government also says that while the allegations against Mr. Ka are not proven, they are serious and deserve his full and undivided attention as he works to clear his name. And this, of course, is affecting directly Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, because the bulk of the concern is focused on the federal elections and federal politicians, and mainly Liberals who may be caught up in this. The Prime Minister has been doing his best to avoid calling a formal inquiry into Chinese election interference, foreign interference in Canada's elections. And in this case, as I've said on previous evenings, these allegations seem to be finally sticking to the Prime Minister. Trudeau has been covered in Teflon because the media has generally been running interference for him. Cover. Not so much with this. The media is latched onto it. Global is going after it, and the other media is following. So there may be some accountability to be had here. This is far from over. And even though Trudeau has appointed this rapporteur to review the situation and make recommendations that could include a recommended inquiry, it looks in many respects like it's a delaying tactic. There's also some suggestions that Trudeau might prorogue Parliament. In other words, suspend Parliament in order to avoid further scrutiny on this issue. And there's been a lot of talk about a possible spring or summer election, or maybe a fall election, an election sometime this year. But with this, he might just choose to wait. This issue, this is a hot potato. It's not one that Trudeau's going to want to be holding on to heading into an election. This could hurt him. And yet, Poilievre has been slipping in the polls in spite of this. And the most recent polling that we showed you earlier this week suggests the Liberals would actually be reelected with another minority government just by a hair, very, very close between the Conservatives and the Liberals in Canada. And those attacks against Poilievre, honestly, as I've been observing, coming more from, I think, the freedom movement. There is a choreographed smear campaign, for lack of a better description, against Poilievre. And it's coming from the freedom side, the freedom community. How do I know that? Because I know who the freedom players are. And they're the ones who have been most aggressive and consistent with the attacks online, with videos that they've been creating and so on. And I would say that that's probably happening for a variety of reasons, because some of them are PPC, People's Party of Canada supporters. Other ones have other motives, I think. A variety of motives. The strange thing is, I think that with the way the numbers work, these attacks against Poilievre pretty much guarantee that if they continue, and Poilievre's support as the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, if that continues, it's pretty much going to guarantee that Trudeau will be reelected, even with all this controversy surrounding Chinese involvement or meddling in Canada's federal elections. That makes me wonder sometimes about the motivations of those people making those hit videos, hit pieces on Poilievre. What's their real motivation? Is it just to benefit the PPC, or is it something else? Because in many cases, some of the players, their political affiliation is not really clear. We might look at that in more detail over the next few nights. In any event, what we are going to do is take a brief break, a couple of more stories to deal with when we come back after this.
Fear not the storm, for truth is on our side. Maverick News. The world is watching.
So here's a video that has been generating a lot of views, and I'm not going to run the whole thing because this is a video that apparently, and it's shot from a distance, but apparently this is Ukrainian soldiers shooting other Ukrainian soldiers who are making their way to Russian forces to surrender. There they are. And I'm just going to pause it right there. I'm not going to show you. See the three soldiers, I believe it's three. They're shot. You heard the gun being loaded. That's the reality of war. That's the reality of what's going on over there. That's what we're supporting with our tax dollars. I don't know. We need to be aware that war is so senseless. Let's just take another quick break. I need to gather my thoughts, and when we come back, the world according to Gary. Don't go away.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals. individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay. And I don't know how you guys feel about this, but you know, clocks are supposed to jump forward. I think tomorrow, but the US is talking about doing away with the daylight savings time thing. So tonight you're supposed to put your clocks ahead an hour so that at like 12:01 a.m., right? Clocks go ahead, and then that gives us more daylight. But legislation in the US could put an end to that. Senator Marco Rubio last week reintroduced the Sunshine Protection Act that would allow states to make daylight time permanent. So if the law is passed, the law would have knock-on effects across Canada, with provinces including British Columbia and Ontario waiting on neighboring US states to ditch the time change before they do so too. Out in British Columbia, the premier says the province wants to remain in sync with West Coast American states, and he's very much looking forward to getting rid of daylight savings time. So that bill was first proposed in 2018. It has repeatedly failed to get through both chambers of Congress. And last March, it stalled in the House without a vote. University of British Columbia business professor Werner Antweiler tells media outlets that the latest version of the bill has bipartisan backing, and if it passes, BC's time change at 2 a.m. Sunday morning may be its last. Most provinces in Canada, as well as the territories of Nunavut and the Northwest Territories, will move their clocks ahead 1 hour at 12:01 a.m. Yukon and most of Saskatchewan keep their clocks the same time year-round. Yukon made the switch for the first time, or for the last time, in March of 2020. And I don't know how you feel about it, but personally, I don't like having the sun set earlier in the winter. It just shortens those days up. I find it almost depressing. And it makes it difficult to get things done at the end of the day. But I'm not much of a morning person. More of a morning person now that I'm getting older. But I don't know how you guys feel about it. What do you think in the chat? Are you in favor of doing away with daylight savings time? Yeah, I know Saskatchewan. Ria says Saskatchewan doesn't change ever. COVID Warrior says, imagine if there was no time zones. That would be interesting, wouldn't it? Then it would be like I don't know how that would work. I'd have to give that some thought. If everybody was just on the same time, right? So then PM wouldn't mean post-meridian anymore, or pre-meridian, after meridian. It wouldn't matter, right? So I don't know. AM, PM. Fred says clocks are overrated. The sun and moon are right up there. D says flat earth. You know, I had Brian on the phone yesterday, Brian Howell, and he said that we should do a show dealing with conspiracy theories. And I was like, well, I don't know if I want to do a show on conspiracy theories because I don't know if I want to feed into it, you know? But the more I thought about it, well, maybe he's right. Maybe we should do a show about, you know, some conspiracy theories, you know, UFOs or the Loch Ness Monster or Bigfoot. When I was a kid, I was always fascinated with that stuff. How were the pyramids built? Do a show on some of those sorts of issues. Maybe try and do it in more of a factual way so that it's not just dealing with the conspiracy side. I don't know how you guys feel about that. You can let me know. Send me an email. Put some messages here in the chat. Let me know. If you're interested in doing some shows about that, we can explore some of those issues maybe. Yeah, COVID Warriors says a lot of conspiracies are true. They do come true. And I thought, you know, another show we should do is, I was thinking we should invite Kyle Kemper back on, Justin Trudeau's brother, who was on the show before. It was one of the most watched shows of last year. But, you know, he is something of a cryptocurrency expert. And I thought it would be really interesting maybe to get him back on just to talk about cryptocurrency. Thought that might be a really interesting conversation. I can also tell you that on Monday, we're going to have a lady on who needs a transplant. And we're not allowed, apparently, to tell you what exactly her condition is or what organs she needs. There are some restrictions in that regard because she's going through a legal battle. And the legal battle is related to the vaccine. She's being denied her transplant because she is not vaccinated. And this is a big, big, big issue. And she'll be here Monday. I think everyone will want to tune in for that. I say tune in because I'm so old school, but you're going to want to be here for that. It's an important story, and her case will be precedent setting. And I know that for everyone here, this issue will resonate. It will hit home for everyone within our online family here with the Maverick family. My personal opinion on it is that this is an immoral thing to be doing to people. Her case will be a landmark. And we definitely need to draw attention to this issue, and she's going to need help. So stay tuned for that on Monday. Make sure you're here, folks. It's going to be an important broadcast. This is what the platform is really set up for. It's to give voice to the voiceless, give some leverage to people who need attention focused on their plight. So that'll be Monday. But I don't want to leave you hanging tonight with any kind of negativity. So we have to bring my friend Gary back on because he went for dinner and it was killer. Here's the man. From Chatham, Ontario, drag racing aficionado and Mr. Optimism, Gary Riddell.
I'm telling you, man. Last night was fucking crazy. One time I gave you the back of the head. Dinner was unfucking believable. We're talking 14-ounce hunk of prime rib, medium rare. I scoffed it down before I had a chance to take a picture of it. We got a fucking brand new bus. 14 of us on it. Went to Avani's. You seen the gang. Came back here. They pounded the fucking beer and the fucking tequila till they fell out of the fucking chairs. Of course, I'm the babysitter, helping them up off the fucking ground. Oh, what a fucking night. Got one more Chathamite coming today, I think. Fucking unbelievable fucking evening. Unbelievable. So, look at the fucking day we got. Wait a second. Here comes Rhonda and Paul. I'm telling you, right? Yeah, hide. Hide, mister. Yeah. It was a crazy, it was crazy last night. I'm telling you right now. 14 of us on the bus. We only had reservations for 10. They jammed us in. It was crazy, man.
So how was it last night?
Oh, it was. I'm telling you, hunk of prime rib.
I know it's like Canada, eh?
I'm already booked for Tuesday. I'm going back.
You're a big meat eater, are you?
Oh man, that place is just killer. It's killer. I'm so glad you turned me on to it.
I didn't turn you on.
Well, yeah.
I'm just looking at
Unbelievable.
You look like a fucking, no offense, like a Star Trek.
I'm telling you, Star Trek, I'm ready for it. Fucking crazy. Anyway, we got to make a decision for tonight. So, yeah. Morning, Ricky.
How are you?
Oh, I had to babysit last night. They were falling out of their
guys
fucking
down there for a little bit.
Fuck, it was nuts.
Star Trek.
It's crazy. The whole fucking adventure. All right. Yeah. They're just starting to fucking wake up. I'm telling you. Yeah. I'm telling you. This fall, I'm bringing adoption papers and get one of these fucking locals to adopt me because I'm not gonna want to come home next year. I mean, I gotta come home, take care of some shit, but yeah. Hopefully I get all that done and next year I can just fucking stay. We got 3 drag strips. I just gotta find them. I've been too fucking busy going for dinner. Oh fuck. Everybody have a fun day. Okay. Fuck. I'm telling you. Oh man. Yep. Got the cornrows in. We're good to go. Everybody have a fun. Unbelievable. I mean, the whole night was worth all the tea in China. Fucking what a blast.
I do apologize for the language. I didn't fully vet that before running it. But in spite of the language, it's the attitude, man. He's just nothing bothers him. In this crazy, negative world full of wars and conflicts and controversy and all the isms, Gary finds joy in dinner. We could learn a lesson from that. All of us, especially me. You know, you get so immersed in the daily grind, all day, I'm all night, all the time. I'm just absorbing the news. And there's so much negative stuff out there in the world. It's even with the language, it's just refreshing to hear from somebody who just goes through life and is free in his mind. He's just free because he realizes that as he sits there on the beach, the day is his, and it's his to seize, and he does. Seize the day. Make the most of it. They won't make another one. Once it's gone, it's gone. Once it's gone, it's gone. I'll be back tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. But it'll be an hour later because the clocks go ahead. Catch you on the flip side.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.